Finance expert Mitch Roschelle, CEO of M2 Communities, LLC, and visiting fellow at the University of San Diego School of Business with us. So it sounds as though if we were to place a bet, it's unlikely we're going to see a rate cut tomorrow.
Highly unlikely. I think, by the way, Marni, people do bet on it. They bet in the stock
market. You can bet on
everything.
It.
And on poly market, you can bet on it. But this is one I wouldn't take the other side of. Having said that, here's the big issue. I think the Fed and the 7 decision makers on the Federal Open Market Committee are still concerned that tariffs are going to have some impact on inflation, and they feel like they've slayed the inflation dragon, and by lowering interest rates, they could, spur some more demand in the economy, which could bring back inflation. That's their fear. The other side of the coin is that the economy is doing pretty well. There's weaknesses here and there, but the economy can afford lower interest rates without running the risk of hurting the economy. So that's the debate, but I think we know where they'll land this session.
Yep. So we'll revisit in September, most likely. In the meantime, though, big ticket items, and the president mentioned this in his overseas trip. He's concerned about the impact that high interest rates are having on the housing market, for example. I mean, we're seeing that with supply and demand, and people who are locked into low rates, unwilling to move, and others who don't want to take on a high rate.
Yeah, what's interesting about housing, and I've been tracking it for 4 decades, there's 2 kinds of policy that impact housing. There's monetary policy, which we were just talking about, which is what the Fed does. And then there's fiscal policy, which is what Congress does. And I think the move now, if we want to help the housing economy and help the overall economy at the same time, and I'll explain why in a second, is to do something like what the president suggested the other day, which is to eliminate any gains tax on sales of homes where you have a gain in it, and allow you to push that gain into the next house that you buy. I think we need other potential stimuli to get home builders to build more homes, to get city and local government to potentially do something with property taxes. There's a lot that Congress can do, but I think there's only one thing the Fed can do, which is lower interest rates. And for the time being, they're reticent to do so.
We've seen this feud between Jerome Powell and President Trump, or at least President Trump's frustration with a lack of a cut, although his comments most recently when he's overseas, seemed to a bit cool on Jerome Powell and said, I like him. I mean, he's going to be out of the job soon, but I like him. What do you make of that and any impact it would have on a decision?
It's interesting when the president makes a comment overseas, because overseas, they have cut interest rates. If you look at the number of interest rate cuts from the high in the European Union, the Bank of England, for example, they have been more aggressive in cutting rates to help continue to stimulate those economies. So perhaps it's knowing the audience and sharing an internal feud within the United States with a competitor. And, don't forget, the president was there talking about trade and showing our cards to the world stage that we have a feud going on with the West Wing, and the independently run Fed isn't really a good look. So I'm glad the president showed some discretion.
Yeah, interesting observation. Mitch, as always, thank you.